During his evening address, Zelensky said he met, quote, with the leaders of our defense sector, our commanders, intelligence, and the office. Only what is directly necessary for frontline management and ensuring active actions of Ukraine, protecting our state from Russian terror. It was meaningful, and our actions will be powerful. We are preparing the boys, and we are very much looking forward to the delivery of weapons promised by our partners. And at the maximum, we are getting closer to victory. At the maximum, there is the spirit of unity, maximum efficiency. Preparation is also to the maximum. The enemy will surely suffer losses in response for every strike against the Ukrainians. Glory to all who are now fighting for Ukraine. Thank you to everyone who works for our defense and victory. Thanks to everyone who helps." End quote. Russia is now accusing Ukraine of being directly involved in the assassination of Maxim Fomin, known by his pen name Vladlen Tatarsky. The Russian FSB claims that the explosion, together with Daria Trepova, was prepared by a citizen of Ukraine, Yuri Denisov, who, through an intermediary delivery service, handed Trepova an explosive device. Denisov arrived from Kyiv in February through the territory of Latvia to the Moscow region, where he collected information about Tatarsky. After the terrorist attack on April 3rd, he flew from Russia in transit through Armenia to Turkey. In front of the Consulate General of Ukraine building in Krakow, a 62-year-old committed self-immolation in protest. The Ukrainian national shouted to those gathered around him for Ukrainians to return to their homeland and defend the country. He then doused himself with a flammable liquid and set himself on fire. Witnesses extinguished the fire, and he is now hospitalized in critical condition. Berlin has granted permission to Warsaw to transfer 5 MiG-29 fighter planes that Germany inherited during reunification after the Cold War. In 2003, Germany sold 23 of the former East German MiGs to Poland, and under the terms of the agreement of the arms deal, Warsaw must seek permission before selling or transferring the aircraft to another nation. Speaking of arms deals, let's talk about the Russian military, mobilization, and Mir. In the village of Golishmanovo, Tyumen, in Russia, a 57-year-old became irritated with his 33-year-old neighbor for playing loud music. His solution? He got an RGD-5 hand grenade he stole from the weapons factory where he was a security guard and threw it over the fence, badly wounding his neighbor. Nikolai Patrushev, secretary of the Russian Security Council, said there are renewed attempts in the North Caucasus region to oust Russian officials and their Colonel General and aspiring dentist Ramzan Don Kadyrov to establish Sharia law. He indicated the situation is complex, saying, quote, "Contradictions persist among representatives of the religious community due to their personal ambitions, the influence of foreign Islamic preachers, and the struggle for the distribution of financial flows." End quote. He claimed that there are ongoing attempts to, quote, "introduce into the public consciousness the possibility of applying Sharia norms instead of secular laws, the displacement of traditional Islam by its radical movements, and the formation of new Salafi groups." End quote. Patrushev claimed that international terrorist organizations, without naming which ones, were intensifying recruitment in the North Caucasian regions. He claimed that the activity was being committed by secret cells of terrorist, nationalist, and radical religious organizations who are, quote, "controlled by Western intelligence services." End quote. In Chechnya, the region has been hit by increasing sectarian violence between factions aligned with Colonel General Kadyrov and anti-Grozny rebels. In a moment of clarity in understanding religion-fueled extremism, Patrushev added, quote, "I must note that among the reasons for the spread of extremist ideas is the low standard of living, the stratification of society in terms of income, an unsettled life, and corruption." End quote. In Kazan, there was an explosion at a gunpowder factory. An employee was carrying a powder charge to the ballistics test range when it spontaneously exploded, destroying his right hand. It is not clear if ammunition production has been impacted. Earlier, we reported on 2 westbound trains hauling T-12A 100mm smoothbore anti-tank guns in Russia. A video showed 6 of the guns being transported in Russian-occupied Crimea. The anti-tank guns will reportedly be placed on Crimea's west coast, several kilometers from the beaches. Post-World War II Soviet-era T-55 tanks arrived in occupied Zaporizhia and were deployed into combat roles. The T-55s are B-block with several upgrades from the original 1955 design. The medium-duty tank is poorly armored by modern standards and will be particularly vulnerable to drone-delivered IEDs and ATGMs. The 100mm main gun must be within 400 to 800 meters of a newer medium-duty or main battle tank to penetrate the armor without relying on luck. Mobics claim that a group of 500 from Moscow, Voronezh, and Tver were flown to Rostov-on-Don for military training before deployment into Ukraine. Approximately 170 were carved out and taken to the Kadiyivka Auto Works factory in occupied Luhansk. Once there, their military IDs were confiscated and they were reportedly, quote, auctioned off to commanders of private military companies. 57 willingly signed contracts and were assigned to a new PMC called Wolves. On April 8th, the 113 who were refuseniks were taken to Krasnotalivka and had their phones taken away. Family members claim that they have had no contact since. The reports are likely true, with a video of the former president of South Ossetia, Lieutenant General Anatoly Bibilov, glowering at Mobics on April 8th for being cowards for refusing to go on human wave assaults. Bibilov told the men they were being sent to the, quote, 3rd Army Corps, and that, quote, the instructors are from the PMCs because they are experienced fighters, end quote. He condemned the men as cowards and urged them to, quote, defend their homeland. The video originally appeared on YouTube and was geolocated to the Kadiyivka Auto Works. An intercepted radio communication caught a Russian commander giving his field officers an order to kill anyone attempting to retreat, saying, quote, whoever retreats, order the group commanders, kill, fucking kill. Guys, we're not retreating, we're only moving forward. Either we start fighting now and fuck them up, or we will fucking die. Choose for yourself how you want to live, end quote. In our War Crimes and Human Rights segment, we discuss events that might be upsetting to hear about. There is graphic detail in today's report related to sexual violence. Please feel free to skip ahead to the next segment. Timestamps are in the description. There is another video of PMC Wagner committing a war crime against their own. In a graphic video, a mercenary with the PMC is restrained by his brothers in arms and brutally sodomized with a mop handle. Reportedly, it was done as a punishment and filmed and distributed as a warning to others. We are not providing a link to the video or still pictures. Maxar satellite pictures show Russian forces are clear-cutting the Tayaride forest in the Kherson region. Some of the timber is being taken to Russia, while the rest is being used to build defensive positions in Kherson, Crimea, and Zaporizhia. In geopolitical news, in the quiet Massachusetts town of Dighton, 21-year-old Airman First Class Jack Teixeira of the Massachusetts Air National Guard was arrested by federal authorities in, quote, connection with an investigation into alleged unauthorized removal, retention, and transmission of classified national defense information, end quote, according to U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland on Thursday. He was arrested without incident, spending his last moments reading a book outside on his parents' back porch while helicopters circled overhead. His shirt dripped in sweat as he returned to SWAT officers who took him into custody. Teixeira's specialty is a 1D7X1, which is described by the Department of Defense as someone who, quote, manages and performs defensive cyber operations and cyber support functions in garrison and at deployed locations. Surveys, secures, protects, defends, preserves, designs, builds, operates, and extends data, networks, net-centric capabilities, and other designated systems, end quote. He is assigned to the 102nd Intelligence Wing of the United States Air Force, located at Otis Air National Guard Base in Sandwich, Massachusetts, where Teixeira worked the night shift at the base. The 102nd Intelligence Wing describes its mission as, quote, to provide worldwide precision intelligence and command and control, along with trained and experienced airmen for expeditionary combat support and homeland security, end quote. According to the Facebook page of the 102nd, Teixeira was promoted to Airman First Class in July 2022. Outrage was expressed by analysts, military commanders, pundits, and government officials. In a statement after Teixeira's arrest, Senate Armed Services Committee Chairman Jack Reed, a Democrat from Rhode Island, said, quote, this was a major security breach that cannot be allowed to happen again. Leaking this trove of classified information endangered our military and intelligence professionals and undermined the security of our allies and partners. Anyone with a security clearance who betrays their country by purposefully mishandling classified documents or disclosing classified materials must be held accountable, end quote. Not all outrage, however, was directed at Teixeira. United States Congressperson Marjorie Taylor Greene wrote, quote, Jake Teixeira is white, male, Christian, and anti-war. That makes him an enemy to the Biden regime. And he told the truth about troops being on the ground in Ukraine and a lot more. Ask yourself who is the real enemy, a young low-level National Guardsman, or the administration that is waging war in Ukraine, a non-NATO nation, against nuclear Russia without war powers, end quote. Congressperson Mike Lawler, a Republican from New York who sits on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, responded, quote, no, it makes him an enemy to America. Leaking classified documents, especially this sensitive in nature, is a crime, and he should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. His conduct is indefensible and should be universally condemned, end quote. The Kremlin and most Russian pundits dismissed the leaked documents as an intentional disinformation campaign before Ukraine's counteroffensive. It is unknown when Teixeira will be formally charged, what the charges will be, and if or when he will be transferred to military police to face the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Once arrested, the clock is running, with a formal filing of criminal charges required within 48 to 72 hours, depending on several issues too nuanced to go into detail. Several of our readers and listeners asked about Tucker Carlson's broadcast on Fox News last night and his claim that the papers reveal that Ukraine is losing 7 soldiers for each Russian soldier killed. That is false information based on the poorly manipulated documents circulated outside the Thug Shaker Central Discord on 4chan, Telegram, and Twitter. Ukrainian officials said they intentionally did not divulge a full picture of critical intelligence to their United States counterparts because they believed the intelligence arm of the U.S. government couldn't keep the information secure. While not directly denying the Washington Post report that the leak has forced Ukraine to delay its planned spring counteroffensive, Kyiv dismissed U.S. reports that this was a critical blow to planned military operations. In economic news, using Rostat data, the analytical service of the Finexpertise Auditing and Consulting Network calculated that the number of workers under 30 years old by the percentage of the population in Russia had hit an all-time low. The pool of available workers dropped by 802,000 in 2022, with 14.9% of the Russian workforce under 30 years old. The hardest-hit regions were Moscow, St. Petersburg, Penza, Novgorod, Tomsk, Astrakhan, Kabardino-Balkaria, Amur, Smolensk, and Adygea. Penza's workforce dropped by almost 20%, while the reduction in Moscow exceeded 15%.